European?
We invented science and industry. We invented science and industry, and you want to tell us to stop because, oh my God, we're so bad. We built the modern world. We built the modern world. Europeans. Built the modern world. We invented science and industry. We invented science and industry, and you want to tell us to stop because, oh my God, we're so bad. We invented the modern world.
I feel you. You're so dumb.
We invented the modern world.
He's fucking degenerate.
We saved billions of people from starvation.
Are you joking?
We built modern civilization. White people are the best thing that ever happened to the world. We are so amazing, and I love myself, and I love white people.
Say that one more time.
Fuck yeah, white people.
Say it right here.
Fuck yeah, white men. We're white men. We did everything. Look, I don't hate other people. I just love my white men. I just love.
Is a revolutionary act. And now, the David Knight Show.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Third hour of the David Knight Show. Harrison Smith sitting in for David Knight. Millie Weaver joins me via Skype. Thanks so much for joining me, Millie.
Thanks for having me, Harrison. You know, I really wanted to talk about this Covington High School story because it just keeps getting more and more interesting. Now, apparently, Covington High School, this was broken by, I believe, the Gateway Pundit reporter Cassandra Fairbanks, because she's been in communications and talking about how she's been talking with the parents of several of the students at Covington High School. Apparently, Covington High School had to cancel school this morning due to safety concerns and threats that were being made against the school by deranged, crazy people because of all the fake news stories that have been going around about these high school students alleging that they were racist, intolerant, and hateful toward this Native American veteran. When we all know what happened, the media took edited clips, put them together to try to paint this story that absolutely was fabricated fake news to try to push an anti-Trump, anti-white male narrative. And we know that video footage did surface on YouTube and social media that showed the full clips originally in the beginnings of this hit piece smear campaign that the fake news media put out. And several people were reporting that these full video clips were being pulled from YouTube and many of these social media platforms. So why was social media platforms like YouTube and Facebook pulling the full unedited video clip versions down that would have instantly vindicated and proven the innocence of the Covington High School boys wearing MAGA hats? It almost seems like it was intentional that they wanted to allow this fake news story to populate the news and take over the narrative so that you would get all these leftists believing that this group of young, white, toxic masculinity males wearing MAGA hats went out and harassed a group of black men and Native Americans. And so, I mean, is this to push this Hegelian dialectic where we have problem, reaction, solution, once again, where we have all this fake news rampant on social media, then to justify censorship, more censorship, and to justify that NewsGuard site or that NewsGuard app that Google's wanting to implement, where then we have this other outside Big Brother type tech company, almost like Snopes, telling us what's true and what's not, what we can and can't trust, because this is to prevent hoaxes. This is to prevent dangerous situations because of fake news. So you have to wonder, are we going to see leftist media outlets like BuzzFeed and New York Times that perpetuate fake news routinely being thrown under the bus in order to essentially promote and justify censorship on social media of news and this new NewsGuard app that you're going to have on everyone's browsers on Google, essentially like a cart before the horse type scenario where they're going to justify it. I mean, what do you think?
No, you see a lot of people on Twitter taking up this exact argument, saying, okay, now we've seen that BuzzFeed and New York Times and all these places are the progenitors of fake news. Are they going to suffer the same consequences that places like InfoWars have suffered? Even though we haven't done any fake news, they lie about us, say we did fake news, kick us off with it. Then we have BuzzFeed, New York Times actually creating fake news, actually getting these kids, threatened and doxxed and in danger. They have to shut their school down. Real, verifiable, bad fake news, but they suffer no consequences. It's the selective enforcement that is constantly being displayed by the liberals and by anybody on the mainstream media. And I have a video I want to play maybe in the next segment, or maybe we can go to it now. This is Sotomayor, Tommy Sotomayor, getting basically, yelled at and depersoned by a Hooters waitress just for wearing a MAGA hat. And so this really lets you understand that, it doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter whether you're male or female. What matters is they're trying to crush certain voices. They're trying to crush voices that support the president, support Donald Trump. And even, we saw with the Covington boys, you had these black Israelites just saying the most heinous anti-gay, anti-white, racist, anti-black, even all of this just vitriolic stuff, and they aren't even mentioned.
Some of the stuff they were saying was so unbelievably racist towards the Covington High School boys that I don't think they knew how to react. So I think that they just chanted back and they tried to remain enthusiastic. Some of the things that they were saying was, they were making fun of them for being white and saying white people have lice issues, get the lice off your back. They were saying some pretty racist and mean and homophobic things toward these boys. So for them to try to remain enthusiastic, laugh it off, show such restraint for high school kids when they were a big crowd that outnumbered these guys was actually something that should be admired and something that should be the media should have been saying, wow, such restraint these guys showed. And even when these Native American guys then came up and started beating a drum in their faces, they still just smiled and stood there and took it. So they showed unbelievable restraint. And apparently the parents of these children now are getting with lawyers. Cassandra Fairbanks was tweeting out about how she talked on the phone with some of these parents, and they're getting serious. They're getting lawyers. They're going to be going after these fake news media outlets that decided to smear high school children and send witch mobs against them to where these children are terrified to even go to school. The school has had so many threats now, they've had to cancel school for the day. These are the ramifications of leftist media outlets perpetuating fake news and sending witch mobs against people without no trial, no jury, no anything, just you're guilty because the mainstream media says so. And now people's lives and safety are being put in danger. And that's why I'm saying, Harrison, that is it possible that what we're seeing here is the mainstream media purposefully and intentionally generating fake news as a way to, justify things like NewsGuard that people would be calling for on the right and the left, because I noticed that some people on the right were calling for BuzzFeed after BuzzFeed's horrible fake news story came out and was, disproven by Robert Mueller. And then now this, people on the right even have been calling for some of these fake news sites to also be banned as a way of hey, they banned InfoWars, they banned Alex Jones. Why shouldn't these guys be banned? Right? What the problem here is we're seeing people on the left and people on the right now calling for more censorship, more restrictions on the First Amendment, when in fact we should be calling for less. Because the reality here is what happened is we were able to quickly debunk the stories that happened, especially the one with the Covington High School kids, because people were able to get the video footage up that vindicated these young boys. And if social media giants like YouTube and Facebook didn't keep pulling them down with their algorithms and their censorship technologies, it would have been vindicated much sooner. If you would have had InfoWars and all our content up there and many of these other voices, we probably would have been able to get the message out and debunk it a lot quicker to prevent the mass hysteria.
You're exactly right, and this is a point that I think Jack Brasobic has made on Twitter, and I've seen other people make. It's that, if we didn't have social media, or, people are blaming social media and saying, oh, social media causes these lynch mobs to arise, and that's true to a certain extent, but without that social media, we would have never been able to get that truth out there, because remember, the original progenitors of this, the original people coming out with this outrage were the mainstream media. So if we still lived in a time where social media did not exist, or in the future, when people like us are not allowed on social media, then those fake news, mainstream news sites would be able to push this and generate this outrage without anybody pushing back. It's totally dangerous. I think you're hitting the number on the other side. This is the David Knight Show. Harrison Smith sitting in. Don't go anywhere.
Imagine if the lights had been turned off all those years and the incredibly important topics we talk about hadn't been discussed. But it's because of you doing that over the years that we're here. And that's not some platitude. That's not some pat on the back. That is the humble recognition that you are the sea on which all of us sail. I'm the sea, you're the sea. I'm the wind, you're the wind. We are all the sails together in this. But if you hadn't resonated with what we talked about and what we did, if you hadn't prayed for us and spread the word and supported us, we wouldn't be here. If you hadn't been faithful in our shared destiny together, we wouldn't have already had these successes in nationalism exploding across the world and all the incredible positive things happening that have unfolded. But because of you, we've done that. There's an equation. If you spread the word about InfoWars and the articles, the videos, the links, we get around the enemy. And if you fund the information we're producing, it all comes together. But it comes down to that, chicken or the egg. If you don't fund the seed money to keep InfoWars on the air and to fight against the fake lawsuits and the attacks of Soros and Hillary and others, we won't have the information to put on air for all of you to spread. So each one is just as important. But the most critical point the enemy understands is cutting the funding off. They don't want to have us be live on air while all this unfolds. They don't want to have us be here while the globalists push their entire world government agenda and everything we've talked about comes true. They don't want us here where they try to assassinate nationalist and populist leaders and while they overrun Christian countries, the radical Islamicists, they want us off the air. And that's why I am in your hands. You give up. If I back down, if I waver, it's a big victory for the globalists. And if you back down, if you waver, it's a big victory for them as well. It's truly a life and death struggle. So all I'm going to say in closing is this. Our destinies are bound forever. And we're doing something this epic almost feels sick to say, hey, come give me your money. But you've seen what I've done with your money. I have waged war fearlessly and tirelessly. I have dominated globalists. I have overrun their emplacements. We have spread the message of liberty in 1776 worldwide, and we are committed to that destiny. And so with pride, I tell you, financially support us. Any other war chief in a fight for freedom would just say, support me, give me the funding now. I say, get products for the best out there. Win-win situation, fund us, and we're unstoppable together. If we don't do that, there's no future, and we have no shared destiny. I'm very sad that Super Male Vitality, our flagship product, is no longer available when this sells out because we can't get the wild crafted herbs. The process it goes through is so organic, like making of wine, that it can't be produced anymore. So that's why it's the last run. It's available 50% off, even though it's our last run, InfoWarsStore.com, because I want you to experience it before it's gone. But whatever you do, pray for InfoWars. Spread the articles, spread the links, spread the videos. Because without you, we are going to basically be destroyed. But with your support, together we all go into the future. Whatever you do, just remember that the power of you via word of mouth, speaking out and taking action, is the most powerful thing in the universe next to God. And for your support and your undying prayers, I thank you and I salute you. But more importantly, we are bound and I love you. So thank you.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to point something out to y'all. Can I get all y'all's attention for a second? Y'all see that young lady right there? Hold on a second. Excuse me, ma'am. You're the waitress. What's your name so we can know?
Shay.
Hi, Shay. Say hello.
No.
That's Shay. Let me tell y'all something what just happened with Shay. Now, Shay is the waitress for Hooters. Shay walked up to me and she said, saw my hat and said, "Are you a Trump supporter?" Yes. Whilst on her job. Yes. So this is what I was trying to tell y'all about how, for some reason, our women act like being professional just ain't nothing they got to do. Because I don't care what kind of hat I had on. If you are servicing the people, would you then look at a person and say, "What kind of? Why do you support Trump?" And then when I said, "Yeah, she."
We're spending money here, dude. Hey, you're spending money.
And I'm spending money.
You're spending money.
And I'm spending money.
What the fuck?
This all is revolving around a tip. Now, this brother was just trying to buy me a drink. That's all he was trying to do. He told her, "Can you get a drink?" She saw my hat.
So that's Tommy Sotomayor filming in a Hooters where the waitress was basically giving him attitude for having a Make America Great Again hat on. In case you're listening on the radio, yes, Tommy Sotomayor is a black man. Believe it or not, there are black people that support Donald Trump. I know that totally flies in the face of your collectivist identitarian understanding of the world, but people are in fact individuals and have individual mindsets and feelings about things. I know this is shocking to hear for some liberals. But Millie, have you seen that video? And what's behind this? Why are they so easily able to just blanket say all white people are bad, unless you're on our team, and we're fighting for all black people, unless you disagree with us. It's this hypocrisy that they're able to get away with that's so frustrating to me, and to me it ties right into the Covington boys debacle that went on there. It's just hypocrisy run amok, in my opinion. What's your reading of this, Millie?
Well, I think the real story here and the real issue that seems to be perpetuating and building is that we have more and more leftists and liberals calling for violence and mistreatment against Trump supporters, or people wearing Make America Great Again hats, or even people who are just conservatives and who don't go along with progressive belief systems. People who dare that speak up against this mob of progressive echo chamber mentality. That's the real story here. We've been seeing more and more incidences where waiters think it's okay to come up and say, "Oh, are you a Trump supporter?" Give them attitude. And then you have to wonder, is this person going to spit in my food? I mean, it's worse than that. We've had people chase Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk out of restaurants. We've had people, going outside mobs outside of Tucker Carlson's home. We have leftist celebrities and news anchors calling for violence against people wearing Make America Great Again hats, and these Covington High School kids. These are minors that they're calling for violence against and calling for doxing of. These people should be ashamed. And what's alarming is that socially it's becoming more and more acceptable to mistreat people based on their political affiliations or their religious beliefs or their support for the American president of the United States. We had Kathy Griffin, who's a grown woman, okay, obviously not one with much morals. We remember that she had that photo op-ed where she had, a fake President Trump head that she had taken a picture with as though she decapitated the president. She can get away with that. She can remain on Twitter. She can call for the harassment, doxing, and intimidation of minors. She's still on Twitter. We also had SNL writer Sarah Beatty come out on Twitter during this whole situation with the Covington High School kids. And she literally offered to give sexual favors to the first guy that goes and punches the MAGA kid in the face. The high school kid that the Native American guy came up and starts beating the drum in his face, and he's just literally standing there smiling awkwardly, trying to, just make it through this really intense, awkward situation. So
and none of these people are being pulled off Twitter. None of these people are being punished. People report these tweets, and Twitter comes back saying, "Yeah, it's fine. Sure, that guy said, hey, lock the school and burn it down with them inside, but that doesn't violate our terms of service." It's sick.
Yeah, these people can remain on Twitter just fine, even though they're calling for violence, offering sexual favors like a prostitute for someone that goes and punches a minor in the face. This is disgusting, abhorrent behavior, yet Laura Loomer can't be on Twitter. But this girl, this SNL writer, she faces no repercussion and very minimal backlash. The only backlash she's getting is coming from conservative sites like us at InfoWars who are reporting what she said. And she said what she said. We're not perpetuating hit pieces and fake news like the mainstream media does, where they put up edited clips of high school kids and try to demonize them, call for their doxing, and call for violent attacks against them. It's so unbelievable what's happening. And here's a story. At what point are conservatives going to be openly mistreated to the point where minors are even being targeted? Because we know these kids were high school kids, they're minors. And recently when I was in Austin, I take my son to the daycare there every once in a while, and I go in to drop him off at the daycare, and the girl's sitting there, obviously progressive. Austin is surrounded by progressive liberals. Mm-hmm. And she looks at me, and I noticed that the past couple times I've been taking my son, who happens to be a white male, has, blondish hair, to this daycare, he'd been crying and saying, "Please, no, I don't want to go," and really reluctant to go, which started having me a little suspicious, but I thought maybe it's just he was wanting to spend more time with me. No, I go in there, and the lady goes, "Oh, are you a reporter? I think I saw some videos, of you on the internet." And she's like giving me this smirk and this condescending look. And I just looked down at my son, and I was like, all right. And I just walked out with him because I'm like,
wow,
I get what's going on now. I get what's going on here. Just like this guy who's sitting there in Hooters. Yeah, just like the guy who's sitting there in Hooters, he has this waitress come up to him and ask him if he's a Make America Great Again Trump supporter. And it's like, we know what's happening here. Obviously they're going to mess with this guy's food. Obviously, conservatives have to be careful now about their political affiliation and the backlash that these progressives will have against them for speaking out.
Yeah. No, we even have people, literally suggesting, hey, these kids need to go to some sort of re-education center for a little while. It's like we're so close to re-education camps. And conservatives literally now, it's like you got to hide that you're a conservative. Maybe they'll start putting yellow stars on us to identify, who the bad people are in this society. Totally sick. Now, you are going to be interviewing Joel Patrick in the next segment. I'm going to kind of take a back seat. What are y'all going to talk about?
Well, we're going to be talking about the Covington High School situation that happened. And Joel Patrick actually, he's an African-American Trump supporter, conservative, very outspoken. He went there to the March for Life, and he actually ran into these Covington High School kids. And on the other side of this break, you're going to find out exactly what they said to him and his direct perspective of what actually happened.
Of deceit. Telling the truth is a revolutionary act. And now, your host, David Knight.
Welcome back. I'm Millie Weaver, standing in for David Knight. And we have Joel Patrick joining us, who is an activist. He's a Trump supporter. And he went out to the March for Life, which is what these Covington High School boys were attending. And he was able to give me some insight last night when he called me up and wanted to fill me in on what happened and his suspicions surrounding the incident with the Covington High School boys. So welcome, Joel Patrick, and thanks for joining us. Now, Joel Patrick, what can you tell us about the Covington High School boys and the atmosphere out there during the March for Life?
Okay, thanks for having me on, Millie. I can tell you that the fake news started out with a lie from the very beginning. The first lie they told was that these kids were disrespectful. The second lie they told was that these kids were racist. And the third lie they told was that they instigated the confrontation. I was at the March for Life. I actually didn't even realize it at the time, but I took pictures with some of the kids from Covington Catholic and Owensboro Catholic School during the march. I didn't even pay attention until I went back through my camera roll and realized it. First of all, these kids took pictures with me. I'm clearly black, and I'm also a Trump supporter. And so the narrative that they were racist, even if what the fake news had said occurred, is completely false. But secondly, there were some antagonizers at the rally that people weren't bringing up. They were from both Texas, that church in Texas, Westboro Baptist, and the Black Israelites. The Black Israelites are a racist organization that claims that they are the true children of Israel. They shouted racial slurs at these Catholic kids. They were purposefully there to stir up trouble. That there was no reason for them to be there because they don't take a stance on being pro-life or pro-abortion. So there was no reason for them to be there. Same thing with Westboro Baptist. If Westboro Baptist is pro-life, then they should be there supporting. But they weren't even there for any reason. I honestly think that certain groups should just not be permitted to be at certain events, because if you're not a protester and you're not a counter-protester, you're just there to antagonize, why are you there? Like, there is no reason for you to be there.
We have to wonder, why were there all of these proselytizers and preachers at this March for Life? Well, it's really quite simple. It's not that they just so happened to be standing there in Washington, D.C., and these MAGA guys, high school boys came up and started harassing them. They were minding their own business. It's really obvious. There was a March for Life, so it's going to draw a bunch of people. There were hundreds of thousands of people who participated in this march. So, of course, there's going to be proselytizers, preachers, other eccentric groups that want to come and try to preach their opinions and causes and try to pull people over into their belief systems. So you're saying, Joel Patrick, that the mainstream media, the way they displayed this, it didn't take into full account the full atmosphere, right?
Right, and the other thing that it didn't take into account was they weren't even, I don't even know if they were legitimately there to try to convert people to their way of thinking. I mean, the Westboro Baptist people, I was with a group of young ladies who, when they were yelling at them, you're like, you're all whores and you're going to hell. And I was like, you realize that like 90% of the people here are religious, and the majority of us are Christians already. So like for you to go around just saying that, it wasn't even like they were trying to win us over to their religion. We already shared their religion. They're just extremists, and we don't share their extreme ideology. So I feel like they were there just to get some spotlight, to get some press, to gain national media attention. That the Native American gentleman that was involved in the altercation has been involved in multiple altercations. And for him to say that, these kids were there to disrespect the Native American, indigenous people, whatever it was, march is completely false, because nobody was there for the Indigenous Peoples March. Nobody even knew what the Indigenous Peoples March was until it was trending on social media because there was an altercation. People were there for the March for Life. Hundreds of thousands of people were there for that. And that's why everybody was there. And everyone else that was there was just there to start stuff, because there was I never heard of it. Nobody else had ever heard of it. There was no people there. 40 people make it a march. Okay, tomorrow we're going to have a wear your hat on backwards march, and right in the middle of the women's march, and say that the women's march had nothing to do with it. No, they came there to start stuff, and they successfully started stuff. They were saying things against the kids like, go back to Europe, which, can you imagine if a white person wearing a MAGA hat told a black person to go back to Africa? They would be all up in arms. But apparently saying to white people, go back to Europe is cool. So it's cool to be racist as long as you're black or Native American and you're racist against white people, because that's cool, according to the left.
Well, even in the video footage, the full video footage, it showed that the Black Israelites were actually hounding and harassing some of the Black Covington High School students that were there with the other white male Covington High School students that were wearing Make America Great Again hats. So they were also giving a hard time to the Black Trump supporters that were there. And as far as what you're saying, that these groups, these provocative, more extreme groups that were out there kind of harassing the March for Life attendees, we know that during the RNC in Cleveland back in 2016, we had all of these preachers out there, the Westboro Baptist preachers, who were inciting the crowds and stirring up, violence and agitation between the leftists that were out there protesting Trump and some of the conservative Bikers for Trump guys out there. And it then came out in the DNC leaks that the DNC were the ones who were paying for and bringing these Westboro Baptist Church guys out there to perpetuate this lie and this myth that all conservatives and Christians are just a bunch of racist, homophobic, hateful people that want to tell everyone they're going to burn in hell, when you have to wonder, given the coordinated hit pieces and attacks that happened against these high school students, were some of these groups sent out there intentionally by leftist mainstream media outlets to try to incite violence, to try to get a hit piece, to try to demonize the March for Life, because, hey, we can't have this huge march of people out there calling out the systematic abortion and murder of millions of Americans, and let that just stand. The leftist media, of course, are going to attack it.
And I agree with you 100%. I even saw one of the reporters with the New York Times, who his credentials clearly said he was with the New York Times. I asked him who he was with, he wouldn't say. And then I asked him what his name was, he wouldn't give it. So I think they knew that they were about to do something that they had no business doing. And he just didn't want people to know who he was, because he knew it would come out, who he was and what he was doing there. And I guess apparently they're fine with doxing minors, and they're fine with lying about what people did. And that school actually was not able to be open today because of all the threats made against it from the mainstream media. Unbelievable how many celebrities came out and advocated for violence against children. They advocated for violence against children. And then when it came out that they were wrong, they began silently deleting their tweets. So it looked like they didn't do it. But thankfully, a lot of us have screenshotted many of these tweets, and we are not letting them get away with it this time. Because, saying things like, MAGA kids go head first into the chipper, and then having a graphic image with that. Like, how is that tolerant? How is that okay? Here's the other thing, and this is just a personal opinion that I have. Why is it that racism is the end all? It's like murder is okay, predator, preying on children is okay. All of these things are okay, but racism is the end all. It's like, to me, there are things worse than racism. Murder, rape, advocating for violence against children, all of those things are worse than racism, because racism is not this unbelievable end-all evil. There are things worse than racism, and I feel like for the news, they just, they put this label of racism out there like there's nothing in the world that's worse than racism. So I really wish they would stop doing that. Murder is worse than racism. Rape is worse than racism. Advocating for violence against children is also worse than racism. So
exactly, why is it that they turn racism as the be-end all? We'll be hearing more from Joel Patrick on the other side of this break. Stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm Millie Weaver, and you are listening to The David Knight Show. We're joined with Joel Patrick, who is actually at the March for Life, which is the stage where the Covington High School kids had this incident with the Black Israelites and this Native American elder, which set the mainstream media into a frenzied, hysterical attack on Trump supporters and on these innocent high school kids. Now, it's easy to forget and to think that the mainstream media, the leftists, the progressives, are just only attacking white males and, toxic masculinity or masculinity as a whole. And it's easy to think that, okay, so this is just only that the left and the progressives hate white males and they want to demonize them. But we have to remember that doesn't mean that they're favoritizing, Black Americans or Hispanic Americans, because the left is the same organization that's pushing and promoting these institutions that are run by globalists that systematically kill and murder and at staggering rates the Black population in America. We know that more than crime, more than accidents, more than cancer, more than heart disease, more than AIDS, Planned Parenthood and abortion kill more Black babies in America and more Black people in America than any of these groups. Yet they want you to believe that these high school kids in MAGA hats are the be-it-all, end-all, horrible, racist enemy of brown people and Black people in America. What do you think about this, Joel Patrick, about how the message here of the March for Life kind of got pushed aside and stomped out by this story that they did on these young high school kids?
Yeah, I 100% agree, because what they did was they took a very important issue, which is the issue of abortion, and that the fact that there were thousands and thousands of young people out there, thousands of young women, thousands of young men fighting for an end to this abortion. They overshadowed it with, but everyone here's definitely a racist. You gotta watch out for these MAGA people. They're all racist. They knew that there would be MAGA people at a pro-life rally, because 90% of MAGA people are pro-life. And so they knew what was going to go on, and they knew that if they could get something started, that they could make it go viral. They already had all the cameras there. I noticed the other thing was the news focused on the counter-protesters. There was probably 20 counter-protesters at the March for Life. There was not many at all. They focused on them like they were this huge group, and they got a whole bunch of different angles and made it look like there was a huge number of them. There wasn't. They didn't focus on the hundreds of thousands of people that were there for the March for Life. But as far as
barely any people even showed up to the Women's March. The Women's March had a small outcome, a small number of people that even showed up to it, yet the March for Life people had hundreds of thousands. It got barely any coverage. The media didn't want to show that that was happening. And then, like you're saying, they overly inflate the crowds of protesters that were out there. And then, of course, they run all these hit pieces on the Covington High School kids and stir the whole message into that these MAGA kids are hateful against African Americans and against Native Americans, when these MAGA kids are out there speaking out against the systematic genocide of Black Americans in this country that's been happening. We've had over 60 million babies aborted in America since the 70s, since Roe versus Wade first was enacted, and the majority of those babies have been Black babies. So these are people who are actually standing up against these genocidal, racist institutions like Planned Parenthood, yet somehow the media turns it into that they're the enemy, they're the racist, they're the problem. What do you think about this, Joel Patrick, as an African-American yourself, about how there's this total flip and twisting that's going on against these MAGA supporters?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely ridiculous and disgusting. And I think the fact that there were people, Trump supporters that were from Covington Catholic, things like they're going to harvest your organs, you watch out, and things like that. Like, it's absolutely absurd, and it's disgusting. And they shouldn't. There's things that shouldn't be said. And I will say this. Also, I was walking at the March for Life, and some of those people from Westboro Baptist Church pointed to a homeless man and said, "That's your future. This is what you're going to be. You need to stop buying expensive clothes and being on welfare and turn to God." And I was like, "I'm not on welfare." And I was getting into my truck, and he's like, "Well, actually, you need to stop wasting your money on things you don't need. You and your money are going to hell." And I was like, "Well, make up your mind. Am I going to hell because I'm poor, or am I going to hell because I'm rich?" You can't even make up your mind there. But they said horrible things to people walking by. They were just there. To me, I felt like it went beyond free speech, and it went into the realm of harassment. You can't just go up to children and call them obscenities, like call them whores and whatnot. and think that that's okay. And the fact that people aren't condemning either the Black Muslims or the Westboro Baptist people for what they did and their part in this whole fiasco is mind-boggling to me. Because apparently it's okay, as I've said before, it's okay to be racist as long as you're racist against white people. And apparently it's okay to be racist against black people as long as they're a Trump supporter. And I think that needs to change.
Exactly. And isn't it amazing how the leftist media's propaganda is able to twist and demonize Trump supporters as racist and to where you literally have these Black Israelite groups out there saying, oh, watch out, these MAGA supporter white men next to you are going to harvest your organs. All the while, Planned Parenthood is actually the one harvesting black organs. They're the ones harvesting the baby organs and selling them.
Absolutely. And this kind of reminds me of that, the situation we were actually in Kentucky. We were there actually for a Trump rally. I believe I ran into you guys and we started talking and they were actually chanting at me, "Black Nazi, go home." You remember that? Like, what does that even mean?
Right? They were chanting "Black Nazi, go home." And then we started chanting back at this group of leftist protesters, fascists go home, fascists go home, because they were chanting fascist, racist, go home. So we said, yes, fascist, racist, go home. And then the odd thing was they turned around and they started going home. It was like, wow, yeah. I guess the true fascists are going home.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
Joe
great.
Patrick, you had some conversations that seemed to actually really open the eyes and red pill many of these leftist protesters out there when you were talking about the Planned Parenthood racist history that we know about Margaret Sanger and the amount of black babies that are being targeted in these by these abortion clinics. It was pretty amazing to see how effective you were at combating these people. Have you been going out there to these protests and trying to have conversations with these leftists and having any success?
Well, I've been trying to. We haven't had any recently, but I'm sure there's going to be plenty in the coming year. Reminds me of a video I actually saw put on by Live Action where someone actually asked if their donation could specifically go to kill a black baby. And the organization said, yeah, that's fine. Just donate here and do this. And to me, it was like, how are you that okay with being a racist that you would allow people to specify the race of the baby they can abort? It's unbelievable.
It's disgusting. And we've seen that, like you were saying, the leftists, the liberals are able to justify being racist towards black people if they're Trump supporters. They're able to justify being misogynistic and anti-woman against conservative women that are not for killing and murdering their babies. We know InfoWars reporter Caitlin Bennett recently went to the Women's March up in Cleveland, and she was attacked, harassed, assaulted by many of these feminists out there and male feminists out there. This male feminist in particular threatened her. He threatened to late term, what did he say? After term abort her. So he's essentially admitting that abortion is murder.
Yeah. Yeah. And he essentially said he wanted to murder her present day. So that's a threat. That's not a woman's choice right there. That's just you being a murderous, threatening individual.
Exactly. And they don't support women's choice to have a firearm to protect themselves, to protect their own personal safety. But they'll say all day, oh, we're for women's rights, we're for women in general. No, because if you're a conservative woman, you get out there, you get harassed, you get attacked. If you're a black Trump supporter, you get harassed, you get attacked. These people are claiming that they're for these minority groups or these oppressed groups, but all the while, you only get the protections if, in fact, you go along with their narrative and their belief systems and push their progressive agenda. Well, thank you so much, Joe
Marked half price off. I remember my friend Sarah, she was like 32 and she still wasn't married, and she goes, I'm half price off. I'm on the sales shelf.
Discount bin.
I'm in the discount bin.
Bargain bin, yeah.
Yeah. And if you call now, you get Jordan Peterson. Oh, clean your room. You'll get Bill Burr. Whoa. Why? Because the sword of Damocles is hanging above By the way, Sword of Damocles, I've realized talking about this so much because I have one over my head now. I've been banned from every platform but YouTube, and we know we are seconds away from vanishing. So please bootleg this. Please take this. Please take all my content. I promise you I will not enforce a complaint. But, and I was go look at the hashtag Aquaman. It's all chicks. Chicks have ruined action movies. Ladies, you can't beat up 5 guys. I don't know how many times. You know who can't beat up 5 guys? Conor McGregor. Men cannot beat up 5 guys. Why are...
Tolerance. It's okay to smirk. Please click the big red button to subscribe. It really helps me when you do that. And click the bell to allow notifications so you never miss a new video.
Modern world. Europeans. Built the modern world. We invented science and industry. We invented science and industry, and you want to tell us to stop because, oh my God, we're so bad. We built the modern world. We built the modern world. Europeans. Built the modern world. We invented science and industry. We invented science and industry, and you want to tell us to stop because, oh my God, we're so bad. We invented the modern world.
I feel you. You're so dumb.
We invented the modern world. You fucking degenerate. We saved billions of people from starvation.
Are you joking?
We built modern civilization. White people are the best thing that ever happened to the world. We are so amazing, and I love myself, and I love white people.
Say that one more time.
Fuck yeah, white people.
Say it right here.
Fuck yeah, white men. We're white men. We did everything. Look, I don't hate other people. I just love white people. I just love white men. I just love white men.